change pas la date de fermeture à la pièce, puis on m'en a pris une barre et moi je changerai à la je changerai chez vous. Vous avez le temps, ne stressez pas.
Good morning, everybody. Thank you very much. The sitting is open. I remind the members of the Assembly that they should insert their badge before taking the floor. As you begin your speech, please press microphone button only once and wait for a couple of seconds. The first item of business this morning is debate on the report titled Respect of the Rule of Law and the Fight Against Corruption within the Council of Europe, document 16138, presented by Mr. Frank Schwabe on behalf of the Committee on Rules and Procedure, Immunities and Institutional Affairs. We will conclude this debate at about 11:50 to allow time for the reply and the vote. I call now the rapporteur, Mr. Frank Schwabe. You have 7 minutes now and 3 minutes at the end to debate. The floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Mr. President, dear colleagues. Good morning. Maybe sometimes some people think I have a kind of fever or mania on some people and some countries, but I don't have. It would be much more better not to discuss such topics, but we have to discuss it. We need this anti-corruption report. Why? Because corruption is destroying all our values: democracy, rule of law, and human rights. We can write a book about it, but it is like this. Because of this, we have to deal with it. We must not forget the damage that was done to our parliamentary assembly after the Azerbaijan-founded corruption scandal of the last decade and the consequent importance of protecting ourselves against such risks. But these risks are not something from the last decade. This year we have had near weekly announcements of European politicians being involved in corruption scandals. Many of you will have been following the money laundering corruption scandal involving Didier Reynders. He was 2 times candidate as Secretary General of the Council of Europe. Here, there is no court case now, but there are really very interesting and really adventurous accusations against him. I really refer to you to check it. When you read about these cases, you think you are in a mixture of James Bond and maybe a comedy, but it's the truth, unfortunately. There are stories where people here in Strasbourg, in hotels, hide money under a bed in a hotel. There are stories that people who came from the Parliamentary Assembly home in the last years, they went to their bank the next day and they put cash money on their bank account. In Germany, there's an indictment by the public prosecutor about the influence here in the Council of Europe on reports, on rapporteurs, on election observation missions. It's the former chair of EPP and the German delegation, Axel Fischer, who is accused to get some 10,000 euro. Karin Strenz, who unfortunately passed away, a former member in this assembly, is accused to got 150,000 euro. And Idiot Lindner, a former member of this parliamentary assembly, is accused to distribute 3.4 million euro. And we don't know where it is. So that means there is an evidence, there is a situation, a real situation we have to face in the Parliamentary Assembly, in the European Parliament as well. And we have to deal with it and we have to respond to it. We have to take action. I want to thank the civil society and media, like the European Stability Initiative, like the OCCRP, like movie makers. There are movies, meanwhile, about it and documentaries, because they are the ones who try to bring new trust in this organization, and they really make such things public. We have to deal with it. We have to answer to it. And this report tries to answer to it. We have to establish a culture. It's not, I don't want to accuse single persons. We need a culture of anti-corruption, that we are aware. We need awareness of the difficulties and the challenges we have to prevent it at the end. It is crucial that democratic institutions are able to take decisive action to prevent, detect, and act upon risks that could undermine their credibility and the trust of the public in those institutions. This report and the draft resolution and recommendation we are debating today are a result of a number of years of reflection and response to the current challenges. And I would like to say that there are maybe 5 key proposals in this report. The 3 first are about how we can improve our rules of transparency. So what we want to do firstly is a single online updatable declaration of interest. It should start from the 1st of January 2026 already. So this report seems maybe not the most interesting one in this week, I don't know, but it has an influence on you. Please check it, read the report and check what you should do quite soon. Secondly, the amendments would increase the implications for those members that repeatedly fail to comply with the obligation on us all to complete a declaration of interest. We make it more simple for you, so nobody can say, I don't know how to do it, I forgot it, whatever. If you do it twice, we go to the national parliament. We inform the national parliament and ask the president of the national parliaments not to appoint such a member again in the delegation to the PACE. Thirdly, detection is important. So for now, you say, I make a declaration and I declare it and nobody control it. We will control it better in the future, and each and everyone has to know it. Fourthly, we need an improved system for reacting to alleged breaches of the code of conduct. So what we try to introduce is a kind who is looking into the history. I would call it IBEC light. So around the Azerbaijan scandal, we had an IBEC. They produced an IBEC report. On this report, the Rules Committee could take decisions. Now we want to ask 7 judges, former judges of the court, to be prepared if we need them in a special case to help us. But finally, the decisions will be taken by the Rules Committee, although we will change the name of the Rules Committee. And fifthly, I suggest improving the coherence of the rules in ensuring that enhanced ethical standards are applied to all those granted specific roles within the Assembly. That means we look into each and everyone's declarations, but we look into the specific situation of those who are presidents, vice presidents, chair of election observation missions, going to election observation missions, chairs and co-chairs of committees, and so on and so on. I consider that ethical standards are essential for democratic institutions, and we have really to do everything to support it. With this decision of the report, we have 2 decisions, let's say in parallel, and in the report and in parallel. First, as I mentioned already, we will change the name of the committee to a Committee on Rules, Ethics and Immunities to make clear about what we speak there, and we will introduce a general rapporteur on ethical standards and anti-corruption. So, dear colleagues, please let's discuss this report. There are no amendments for now, because for sure no one is against a report against corruption, for sure not. But again, we need to implement a culture of anti-corruption. And this is an exercise each and everyone has to do. No one here is born as a corrupt one. But there is a kind of danger, and we have to know that it is here. We have this kind of danger, and we have to do everything to prevent it. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Mr. Schwabe. As rapporteur, now we follow on the speakers list, and in this debate I first call on behalf of political groups Mr. Reinhard Petru from Poland, in front of ALDE Group. You have the floor.
Dear colleagues, first of all, let me congratulate the rapporteur for solid and important report for this Assembly. And the Assembly has come a long way since 2017 corruption scandal. The so-called caviar diplomacy involving Azerbaijan seriously damaged the credibility of our work and revealed major weaknesses in our ethical safeguards. Just for the recollection, in response we took important steps. We launched an independent investigation, introduced codes of conduct, strengthened rules on gifts and lobbying, and required members to fill public declaration of interest. We also established sanctions and banned lobbyists linked to the scandal. In 2023, we added a speak-up policy, giving members and staff a safe and confidential way to report wrongdoing. But As the report rightly argues, this reform must continue and go much further. The report rightly proposes a few steps in order to strengthen our credibility. The major improvement, one single public and updatable declaration of interest for each member, covering all roles held, from rapporteurs to vice president. This is going to replace the current patchwork of different declarations with one clear, accessible document. Second, the report tightens rules on conflicts of interest, gives lobbying and outside paid roles. Third, in the improved enforcement, it's important. Members who do not submit declaration won't be allowed to hold official roles. I think it's very important, and this is really the enforcement. If a member ignores this, for 2 years the national parliament will be notified. Sanctions will also apply to members who leave assembly before proceedings are complete. Fourth, the report proposes a stronger ethical culture, clear guidance, online tools, and even appointing a general rapporteur on anti-corruption, which we support, and ethics, to keep this issue at the forefront. In our view, the responsibility should lie more with the national parliaments, since they are the ones who delegate to the Council. It's important local parliaments respond to the Council when a member does not fulfill his or her declaration on time. Colleagues, our past response to corruption was necessary and serious, but this report gives us a chance to go further, to simplify the rules, close loopholes, and truly lead by example. The group fully supports this proposal, and the strength of this assembly depends not just on its voice, but on its integrity. Thank you much. Thank you much for the report.
Thank you very much. I now give the floor to Mr. Andrej Hunko in front of UL Group.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident.
Thank you very much indeed, President. Ladies and gentlemen, I would like first of all to congratulate Frank Schwabe on all of this hard work in this field, and I have to say that I've been a member of the Assembly since January 2010, so I was actually here when the corruption scandal was raging here. I was an active member at the time, and I have to say that as a new member, it was really difficult for me to make out what was happening behind the scenes. There were a whole slew of decisions, and I have to say that I was scratching my head and struggling to understand, because it's very difficult to actually work things out if you weren't familiar with that caviar network. So things were very opaque, and I know that you arrived a little later, Frank, and I know that you have very much focused your efforts on uncovering that whole network and have done so very successfully. So once again, my congratulations to you for that. And I think that the various recommendations that we have now in this new report and in the recommendation all make sense. I really do think that it is a good idea for us to endorse them and to enforce them. Right now in Germany, there are a few trials underway, criminal proceedings against members of the German parliament who were formerly members of this assembly. And put quite simply, it is scandalous. People who allow themselves to be put forward for election to this assembly and then would allow themselves to be offered financial inducements stretching to 4, 5, 6, or even 7 figures. So I think we are drawing the right conclusions. Allow me to share with you, by way of conclusion, some of my own personal thoughts on the matter. Obviously, it's always a problem if, on the one hand, you've got huge amounts of money and certain interests, which was the case of Azerbaijan, and then, on the other hand, recipients, people willing to take that money. And obviously, money will then find its way to its destination, sometimes via the pillows of Strasbourg hotels. And we have to find ways to try and stem that kind of corruption. But if you live in a world where disparities are increasing and you have such concentrations of great wealth, then people are going to be vulnerable to these kinds of inducements and corruption. I think we have to not lose sight of that in our fight against corruption. Thank you.
Thank you very much. In the debate, I call next Ms. Petra Bayer from Socialist Group.
Yeah, thank you very much. We know that many countries start to fight corruption and in politics when there is a specific case that becomes public. And of course, that's a good reason and better then than never. But I think that we all are united in the idea that a system to assist MPs to respect ethical standards from the scratch is much better than one only relying solely on responding to the breach of standards. It's obvious that throughout Europe we have very diverse standards, from clear settled laws up to codes of conduct, so guiding principles. And indeed, Frank said what we need is an underlying culture. So we also have to work not only on laws, but also on a culture. I think it's important to harmonize our standards, the degree of transparency, the content we disclose. We must have clear standards how to validate the disclosed information, also something that we at the Parliamentary Assembly are still lacking, how to execute the requirements of ethical behavior in politics, and how we sanction infringements. We must be aware that standards for ethics in Parliament settled once will not stay the same forever, but need to be adapted constantly, improved and enforced all the time. The goal is not only to boost public trust and accountability in parliamentary institutions. The target is also to prevent and detect unethical conduct, such as intransparent asset declaration or expense reporting, to deter misuse of public funds to corruptible activities. We also need enforcement mechanisms to reassure public that there are adequate responses to violation of ethical standards. This all will need sufficient personnel and resources, also here in the Parliamentary Assembly again. We know that we are lacking that at the moment, but also common learnings and international cooperation. I want also to thank Frank Schwabe for this very important and timely report. I think, as you already said also in the committee, it is one first step, and there will be many steps to follow. So I'm quite sure that it will be a topic that will guide us in our political work for the next years. So thank you for these, it's not the first steps, I know, but for these very important steps at the moment. And we can have the chance to build on these fundaments that you will settle with this report, and it will be a concern of all of us to really have a culture, as you said, and really also to boost trust in institutions like parliaments again. So thank you very much.
Thank you, Ms. Bayer. In the debate, I call next Mr. Christophe Bricot on behalf of EPP Group.
Merci, Monsieur le Président. Thank you very much, Chair. I would also like to commend Mr. Schwabe for the excellent work done. And it's taken quite some time on a subject that very much affects all of us. Corruption is an illness and is quite special, quite particular. It directly affects very few of us, and yet the consequences thereof weigh on all of us. Trust is a treasure, the trust we have from our fellow citizens, and we must protect that. The trust amongst ourselves as well, because remember that corruption is one of the favorite weapons of those countries carrying out hybrid attacks against us. Alexis de Tocqueville, in a work called On Democracy in America, which is a bit ironic, isn't it, as a title at this moment, but in any case, he said that what threatens society is not corruption, but it's all of us letting our guard down. Corruption is not an ideological issue. Nobody in this room would say that they're in favor of corruption. However, it's an issue of taking resolve. Are we resolved enough for the battle that is required. And I think when we talk about these tools for transparency and surveillance that are mentioned in the report, inquiry measures as well, are a good step forward. And since we are lawmakers, we have to make sure that we place upon ourselves as well the same obligation to obey rules in transparency and honesty. So this report is essential. It's very much a step in the right direction. We support it without reservation. We will continue to participate in all works being carried out, and which will no doubt change over time and as we start to put into place these tools. And thank you once again for all the work that you've done.
Thank you, Mr. Bricco. And now in debate, I call next Mr. Marcus Wichel on behalf of Conservative Group.
Thank you, Mr. President. Following a review of the report presented, I am reminded of the timeless proverb, trust but verify, which gained prominence during the Cold War disarmament dialogues. This phrase encapsulates a fundamental principle that is particularly relevant to our discussion today. Our assembly has evolved significantly from a position of naive trust to one characterized by diligent verification and accountability. This transformation was necessitated by serious corruption cases that emerged in the 2010s, which served as a wake-up call for all of us. Since then, we have made it our mission to aggressively root out corruption, reflecting our unwavering commitment to not only address past failures, but also to prevent such occurrences in the future. The comprehensive overhaul of our rules of procedure is a testament to our determination to establish a robust and corruption-proof framework. This initiative is not merely procedural, it is essential for the integrity and credibility of our institution. As the saying goes, a fish roots from the head down, underscoring that we as European parliamentarians have a profound responsibility to exemplify ethical conduct and inspire confidence in our constituents. Especially in the context of today's global instability and economic challenges, it is imperative that we earn the trust that has been bestowed upon us. Let us be candid. A failure to uphold this sacred trust not only tarnishes our individual and collective integrity, but it has the potential to undermine the very essence of the European idea. Our commitment to combating corruption is a shared obligation with the European Parliament, which has faced analogous challenges in its own domain. Dear colleagues, we cannot be silent bystanders to corruption. If we allow corruption to thrive, are we not complicit in stealing the future from our children? I implore you all to consider the weight of our collective efforts. Let us work together to ensure that the insights and recommendations outlined in this report translate into meaningful and lasting change. Thank you.
Thank you. And now, after speakers on behalf of political groups, I call Mr. Nikos Tornaritis from Cyprus.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Dear colleagues, I commend Rapporteur Mr. Schwabe and the Rules Committee Secretariat for this excellent report. Updating our ethical standards, it's vital to maintaining our organization's legitimacy and credibility. The values of the Council of Europe, democracy, rule of law, and the human rights are not only our goals, but also guide how we achieve them. PACE has made significant progress. The Code of Conduct, member declarations, the Speak Up policy and revise provisions for former members and election missions are essential steps towards greater accountability and transparency. As the report rightly states, no institution is immune to corruption. Past scandals underline the urgent need for clear rules and effective oversight. We must continue to condemn and prevent corrupt practices while promoting awareness and strong ethical standards. I hope this report will support further reforms and help rebuild public trust. Thank you very much.
Thank you. In the debate, I call next Mr. István Holik from Hungary. Just insert your card, please. You need to insert your card to speak. And you need to press the button, yes.
Thank you, Chair. Dear colleagues, I think it is important to talk about corruption because the European institutions, European Parliament, the Commission, or the Council of Europe accused many member states of corruption and lectured many member states about transparency. And now it seems that corruption and lack of transparency is present in these institutions. So the report raises an important issue, but I still find it incomplete because the biggest corruption scandal of the European Union and the entire European community is missing from this report. Which case is this? The latest report of the European Court of Auditor about the NGO funding clearly showed that left-wing activist groups who carrying out political activities received 7 billion euros from Brussels between 2021 and 2023. According to the report, 40% of the funding went only 30 political motivated organizations. And not surprisingly, these NGOs were funded by the American Democrats with political reason through the USAID program. The USAID and the Brussels NGO funding scandal also affects the Council of Europe because many supported political activist NGOs are in the INGOs program and provide advice to the operation of Council of Europe. Now it's crystal clear that they are absolutely not objective and independent institutions. My question, what will be the consequence, and will the rapporteur point out these possibilities of abuse? Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I now call Madame Louise Morel from France.
Merci, Monsieur le Président.
Thank you very much, President. Allow me first of all to commend the high quality of your work, Rapporteur. A report that you have taken us through today is very rigorous and is very clear, as well as highly topical, because corruption is an insidious scourge, takes many forms, weakens the foundations of the rule-based state, undermines people's trust in our democratic institutions. And it is worth pointing out that in cases of corruption, suspicions are aroused amongst all of the political classes, and that is why they would impugn the probity of all fellow politicians. And that is why it is so important that the Council of Europe has put in place a number of meaningful steps which are designed to consolidate our machinery for preventing corruption as well as developing transparency and accountability, first of all, by instituting an ethics officer, as well as giving enhanced capacity to the Director of Internal Oversight. And I think that all these measures are along the right lines, and we would welcome all these advances, but it's not enough simply to commend them. It's important now to make sure we breathe life into them and make sure that they are publicized and are visible. And although we have these measures in place, we must continue to be vigilant. Although Europe, granted, is the continent which is least affected by corruption, this is what the Transparency International surveys would suggest, is nevertheless a situation in which we are vulnerable. Of course, we had the laundromat scandal, and OPAC used opaque financing methods in order to try and influence voting patterns. And corruption, therefore, becomes a political weapon to manipulate our democratic processes from within. And our institutions, therefore, need to be more resilient and more robust. And that is why I believe our code of ethics needs to be updated on a regular basis. And we should draw inspiration here from what is being done by our neighbour, the European Parliament. We need to make sure that we have a better structure to govern our relationships with interest representatives, and also ways of signalling any kind of irregularities. Because what is at stake, of course, is the trust of our fellow citizens in us and the legitimacy of our public action. So thank you very much indeed for all the work you've done on this subject.
I call next Mr. Ivan Račan from Croatia.
Thank you, Marco. Dear colleagues, dear Frank. It is a privilege to speak in support of this landmark document. This is not just another report, it is in every sense a comprehensive and thoughtful blueprint for ethical standards in our institutions. This report carefully examines the past. It acknowledges the deep wounds left by the scandals. It names names, it cites convictions, and it demonstrates what happens when ethical oversight fails. But more importantly, it moves us forward, not with cosmetic changes, but with deep systemic reform. The strength of this report lies in its scope and precision. It covers everything, from public declarations of interest to whistleblower protections, from banning paid consultancies to redefining the ethical responsibilities of all major office holders, be it presidents, vice presidents, rapporteurs, committee chairs, and political group leaders. It proposes a single, public and updatable declaration of interests, including gifts, roles, and potential conflicts, an elegant solution to a long-standing patchwork of declarations that were neither coherent nor enforceable. It sends a powerful message: transparency is not optional. It also introduces smart enforcement tools, the creation of a conduct investigation panel composed of former European Court of Human Rights judges brings legal expertise and neutrality. And by extending ethical scrutiny even to former members, the report ensures that resignation is no longer an escape from accountability. I particularly commend the emphasis on culture. Ethics is not just about rules. It is about trust, tone, and public confidence. The report urges us to lead by example and build a climate where speaking up is protected, where misconduct is not tolerated, and where public service is once again something to be proud of. And I'm sure this is something where many of us struggle because we are simply often ashamed of what we do. Finally, this report speaks not just to Strasbourg, but to all of us in national parliaments. It invites us to reflect on our own standards, to adopt similar reforms, and to join a network of ethics commissioners that can raise the bar across Europe. This is a comprehensive, courageous, and credible plan, and I urge this Assembly not only to adopt it, but to honor it at every level of our work. Thank you.
Thank you, Ivan. Now I call Ms. Albana Vokshi from Albania. Is she present? You withdraw your... Do you withdraw your speech or... Okay, we can go to the next one. I give the floor to Ms. Minna Leonen from Finland.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, I would like to thank Mr. Schwab for this timely and important report. At a time when our European values of the rule of law and democracy are being questioned, we need to step up our efforts in defending what we stand for. Corruption is a disease that kills democracy. Yes, corruption is a disease that kills democracy. The Council of Europe and this Assembly have done a lot of work to improve our measures to counter corruption, but research shows that we are far from being free from corruption in our countries. My country, Finland, is often topping of the list of the least corrupt countries in the world, together with our Nordic neighbors. This of course makes us proud, but we must never become complacent and think that our job here is done. Although we do not have much or any street corruption in my country where envelopes exchange hands, we do recognize risk of systemic corruption. In small countries where the distance between business and decision makers is quite short, the risk for the so-called best brother practices become apparent. This is especially true for public prosecutors. For this reason, we must make sure to make solid legislation. As decision makers, we might have to recuse ourselves to avoid making decisions in which we might have an invested interest. Systemic corruption is very hard to measure and sometimes hard to prove. But if we are aware of risks, we can put in place warning systems that helps us to counter it. Thank you.
Thank you very much. I now call Ms. Saskia Kluit from Netherlands.
Very much, President. I'm from a political body in the Netherlands that has been regularly be debated on the issue of integrity, which is the Senate. We do not have outspoken corruption cases, but we do have integrity issues. And when you do not treat it, it's a fungi that rots the foundations of our democratic system, and also for our organization, it works the same way. We can only achieve the values we strive for if we also make them apply to ourselves. Our council has been associated with integrity issues and with outrage corruption. I mean, the names are funny, the caviar network, but the impact is of course terrible. And the upside is one can say that we found these cases, and Frank did a really good job in doing that, so our system works, but the reality is that we are not free from that now. We almost voted for an SG, Secretary General, who has now been inflicted with a corruption case in a lottery, so we need to be sharper. So we have to do better. Corruption, and even the smell of corruption, damages our integrity to a very serious part. So it brings legitimacy questions to who do we work for? I mean, we have all been chosen by people, but maybe we work for a company, or maybe we work for another country instead of our own people. And that cannot be the case. So I'm very happy with the very concrete changes you propose that we make. I'm very happy with that. It clarifies what we need to do, but it also specificizes what we need to do, and it makes it punishable, which is very important. And I'm explicitly very positive that we are going to redo our work, because we know that caviar can be a means of corruption. We know that a house can be a means of corruption. We know that money can be a means of corruption. But we are not debating yet that also attention on social media can also be a financial transaction. And if one party is being specifically promoted on social media, that is also a financial transaction and should be made and treated like that. So I hope we see that back in our next report. And thank you, President. This was what I wanted to say.
Thank you very much. I now give floor to and I call Mr. Pedro Neves de Sousa from Portugal.
Mr. President, dear colleagues, the corruption is a poison that contaminates the health of the liberal democracies and helps the populism speech to grow all over the world. In fact, if we don't take good care of democracy, other political forces, built usually with fake news and searching for autocratic policies, will conquest and earn the vote of the citizens. In these troubled days and attending to the geopolitical framework, the democratic values must be preserved, and we need to recall them every time and everywhere. Otherwise, we cannot be surprised, and we will assist regimes that want to mitigate and most of the times to suppress and to knock out our fundamental rights. In this basis, the respect for the rule of law and the fight against corruption represents an enforcement to the values of democracy, freedom, and transparency. That's why we need to be strict and demanding concerning to the ethical framework. There are no one perfect world, no perfect persons, and a life without mistakes. But those who are invested in public positions, mostly when they have the power to govern, to legislate, or to decide in a court of law, the three pillars of the state, as Montesquieu talked, cannot be in a cloud of suspicion in order to preserve their authority and the trust of the citizens. All the mechanisms for monitoring integrity, such as code of conduct or the declarations of interests to avoid conflicts, play a crucial role in the construction of strong political institutions with superior ethical standards. For aim these goals, we need a new approach and appropriate legislation. These reasons make us support this report. Increase the confidence in the political institutions is the passport to reinforce our values and the trigger to move away undesirable ideas and political proposals. At least, we can never forget that preserving and protect our democratic values and fighting against corruption will always be a work in progress and need the contribution of all, multiplying our strengths in order to establish responsibility and transparency in public governance. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. I call now Mr. Alfred here from Switzerland.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chair. Thank you, Frank Schwabe, for your report. I think Frank and I, we've been in this Council of Europe for many years, and we also had some good experience about the corruption, mainly when we were observing the elections in Azerbaijan, and it was very easily to tell who could have gotten a bribe and who didn't get the bribe. And we nearly lost our report. We made a negative report about the outcome of the election and how the elections were done, but we nearly lost it because we had many members of this body here that were bribed and that wanted to give a clean sheet to the Azerbaijani government. And I also want to thank, in this regards, to the European Stability Initiative, to Gerald Knaus. I think it was him at that time that was really investigated in this caviar diplomacy. Our body was not able to clean ourselves up. It was an NGO who had to do this work. It was also because of the media that brought it on television about what is going on in our Council of Europe. And finally, when I was head of the Swiss delegations, we wrote a letter to the Bureau in order that an investigation will be started, which has been done by former judges of the Court of Human Rights. And they made a very good report, and finally we got rid of those people who brought a lot of damage to our institution. So today we are, I hope, we are on a better side than before. One of the problems is that our national parliaments, they really don't care what we are doing here. I think that's valid for most of our countries. So they send us here, but they don't care what we do here. And that's another problem. So the jurisdiction is a problem, because if someone takes a bribe, who will be responsible to follow up this crime? We don't have a body here that will make this investigation. It's always the national courts that must follow it through, and that might be another problem. But there is also something like responsibility of our own. I think we know the people here. We are engaged in groups. We know each other, and we should be attentive how people vote. And if there will be another network of bribery, because the network we had in the past, it was among all political groups, it was among all nations, and that's something that was scary, and it's up to us to have an eye on it, and if we see suspicion, we need to act immediately as individuals. Thank you, and thank you, Frank Schwabe, for your report.
Thank you very much. I call now Mr. Denis Begic from Sweden.
Thank you. Thank you, Mr. President. I must begin by addressing the claims of corruption among left-wing parties and NGOs. This is the typical right-wing rhetoric without any substance, directly echoing Putin narrative. I will always be one supporting my sister party and organizing against corrupt governments and those who fail to respect human rights. There is not corruption about it. It is my duty to actively support this fight, whether inside Europe or beyond. When power serves itself instead of people, it's not just unjust, it's the betrayal of democracy. As a social democrat, I cannot and will not accept that. Our duty here is clear: to protect democracy, to uphold the rule of law, and to safeguard human rights for everyone, not just the words, but in action. But let us be honest. None of those is possible without trust, and nothing destroys trust faster than corruption. Corruption is not just a misuse of power, it's direct attack on democracy itself. It diverts public resources away from schools and hospitals, it closes doors for young people, and it tells people that the system is not for them, but for the few. In my country, Sweden, we learned that trust in institutions is something we must earn every day, through openness, accountability, and constant self-reflection. I welcome to efforts in this assembly to address those very issues. The proposed reform of the rules of procedure, from clear codes to conduct of stronger rules around lobbying and transparency, are not just administrative challenges. They are political signals. They show that we, as elected representatives, are willing to hold ourselves to the same standard we expect from others. It is especially important that those rules apply not only to the ordinary members, but also to those in position of leadership, including committees, chair and vice presidents. No one should be able above scrutiny. Power must come with responsibility. Colleagues, we cannot demand democracy standards from our member states if we not first apply them here. With those walls, if we want to be credible, we must lead by example. Let us not wait for second scandals to react. Let us act now, not because we are forced to, but because it is the right thing to do. We owe it to our citizens in Europe to be better, to be cleaner, to be braver. Thank you.
Thank you. I now invite Ms. Santi Montemera Castillo from Mexico to address us.
Hi, good morning. It's a pleasure to be here, as I have been on a yearly basis the past 4 years. As a member of this committee, representing my country, Mexico, my city, Cancun, and my state, Quintana Roo, from the Mexican Federal Congress, I am grateful for the opportunity to speak today such as an important topic. As we all know, the Council of Europe is an intergovernmental organization whose main objectives are to promote human rights, democracy, and the rule of law in Europe. Even though its primary focus on European countries, its influence and relevance also extend to Latin America and specifically to Mexico, which has been an observer state since 1999. For several reasons. One of those reasons is the human rights. The Council of Europe is well known for the work in the protection of human rights, particularly through the European Convention of Human Rights. This has always served as a model for Mexico in the development and strengthening of its own human rights legal framework. Cooperation and dialogue. The Council of Europe promotes dialogue and cooperation between countries. This is of great benefit to Latin American countries such as Mexico, which seek to build stronger ties with Europe and learn from its experience in governance and justice. Rule of law. Promoting the rule of law is essential for sustainable development and peace in any region, especially in the difficult times that we all know the world is currently facing. The Council of Europe principles and standards have inspired legal and constitutional reforms through Latin America. Public policy expertise. The Council of Europe has developed a wide range of policies and strategies on issues such as fighting corruption, strengthening democracy, social inclusion, building pluralist democracy, and addressing pressing social issues such as intolerance and environmental challenges, among others. These approaches are of great value to Latin American countries facing similar challenges. Relations between Europe and Latin America, and its case with Mexico in particular, can continue to grow through exchange programs and joint initiatives of topics of common interests, fostering deeper understanding between our regions. Through the Council of Europe, Latin American countries can establish networks and alliances that allow us to share experiences, resources, and knowledge in the promotion of democratic values and human rights. In conclusion, the Council of Europe is an important ally for the whole Latin American, providing framework for the strengthening of democratic institutions and of human rights through the region. One of the most admirable aspects of the Council, which has been addressed through various initiatives and regulatory frameworks aimed to providing transparency, integrity, and accountability within the government and institutions of member states. International cooperation and the commitment of member states are essential to the success of these initiatives. As I mentioned at the beginning, they have been and continue to be an invaluable tool for Mexico. It is important for federal legislators to look at these experiences and examples and apply them to our own realities and dynamics. Thanks for your attention.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Mr. Vladimir Vardanyan from Armenia.
Thank you, Honorable Mr. Chair. First of all, let me congratulate Mr. Schwabe, the reporter, for an excellent report reflecting the main challenges in the field of fight against corruption our organization facing with. The Council of Europe was established to enhance respect for the rule of law, improve democracy, and uphold human rights. During the last 75 years, we have reached tremendous results in the field of fight against corruption. It is important to recognize that the Council of Europe is more than just a human rights organization. We became the benchmark, standard-setting organization in many fields, including human rights, democracy, rule of law, and fight against corruption. We have created GRECO and launched other anti-corruption initiatives. Several years ago, we were all taken aback by the news that our assembly, a democratic forum, decided inter alia to combat corruption, included members who was embroiled in corruption practices. It was a shock for all of us, and those corruption scandals severely tarnished the organization's image. Nevertheless, due to the decisive actions of this assembly and its brave members, we were able to rectify the situation. Ladies and gentlemen, there is no vaccination against corruption. We must remain vigilant and proactive in our daily lives, adapting to the challenges we encounter. We need to establish updated integrity rules that align with current standards and expectations. Having clear, user-friendly rules of procedure while prioritizing ethical standards will significantly enhance our organization's anti-corruption efforts. The integrity of the Assembly's members should serve as a foundational principle for our ongoing work. I firmly believe that an updated code of conduct for our members will set a new benchmark for all the member states. It's difficult to comprehend and even more complicated to explain to others why within the organization where the integrity of members is a keystone, we still face instances of members failing to submit their annual declarations. Therefore, the amendments to the rules of procedure proposed by the draft resolution are both timely and justified. Each and every member of Assembly should operate with the understanding that the status of a member of the PACE is not given for granted. It gives privileges and immunities, but also implies high moral standards and responsibilities. Those who hold this status should respect the Council of Europe, this Assembly, and its values during their terms of office and especially after their termination. Any former members of the PACE who fails to honor these values should continue to be benefited from their honorary status. This would be our moral response to those who disregard the very essence of our organization, regardless of whether we are ordinary citizens, members of parliaments, or head of states. Thank you.
Thank you. Our next speaker is Ms. Ayaskaran Abdiva from Kazakhstan. I think she may not be here. No? Then I now call Lord Leslie Griffiths from the United Kingdom.
President, forgive this stumble at the beginning. I thought I had another 3 minutes space before I entertain everybody with my ideas. It is a privilege to stand in this debate and take my part, and I'm grateful to Frank Schwabe and his collaborators in putting this report together. It is astonishing, however, that 25 pages are needed to spell out what all of us ought to know instinctively, that doing wrong things and risking losing one's trust is simply at odds with everything that this particular institution stands for. I'm sorry to quote a little Latin, but I am in Europe. Quis custodiet ipsos custodes? Who will look after, scrutinize the activities of those who are there to scrutinize? And it seems to me that of all the bodies that I know about or am member of, this is the place where the highest possible standards should be a matter of course. It therefore shocked me, I have to say, to discover that there had been the infractions alluded to in this particular report, and I hope it will be a wake-up call and a shock to our system. However, from the report, I do see that whilst we're emphasizing the importance of effective enforcement, it's recognized that there are quite a large number of cases that don't come to the attention of the department. Well, we really must do something about that, and we must help each other. There are shortcuts always in the public lives that we live, attractive other possible ways of behaving. They come our way. We must check ourselves out, and we must help each other to check themselves out as we move forward. Trust can't be bought in the marketplace. I have to say that, rather naughtily, I think, I had wanted to believe that I'd got the title of the debate wrong, respect for the rule of law and the fight against corruption within the United States of America. I just wondered how that one might work out in another place. But now the trick will be to turn the fine words, the worthy words, the outstandingly obvious words that fill this report into what is described here as coherent, accessible, user-friendly codes of advice. In the United Kingdom, I have been involved with helping our own parliament through a crisis where the Archbishop of Canterbury himself has had to take resignation from his office and lose his seat in Parliament. So even at the highest levels, there are these infractions. This is the place where that has to stop. People must know that what happens here, what comes from here, the personal testimonies and the ways of behavior that we offer to the public at large are incorruptible. There is no option other than that without losing our credulity altogether.
Thank you, Leslie, and thank you for the Hoyle. Our next speaker is Ms. Ingrid Schou from Norway.
Dear President and colleagues, and dear Mr. Schwabe, we have been colleagues in the Assembly for 14 years. For many years we sat side by side in the hemicycle. Our surnames started with S. For many years we have worked together in the Rules Committee, and we have not always agreed. But on this issue, on the fight against corruption in our Assembly and the Council of Europe, we have collaborated closely and we fully agree. I congratulate you on this important report. 8 years have passed since the corruption scandal erupted in 2017. It is time to take stock and to review the measures that were implemented after the thorough process following the work of the independent investigation body. And President, in my report on the changes to our rules of procedure, which I presented last year, I included a suggestion to revise the rules so that they are more user-friendly. I'm pleased that Mr. Schwab and the committee is building on this and suggesting a restructuring of our rules so that there are 2 parts. The first part setting out all the relevant ethical standards and codes of conduct, and the second part setting out the procedure rules. This would make the ethical standards and codes of conduct more accessible as compared to the many additional documents which now must be consulted. Mr. Schwabe's suggestion to make a single public declaration of interest is also very good. It is important that we streamline this important process so that it is possible to refer to one source when there are inquiries about conflicts of interest. The proposal that all declarations of interest should be made public is also important. I see no reason why this should not be transparent. At first glance, the draft resolution might seem complicated, with many proposals to change rules and practices. To some, this might seem bureaucratic and cumbersome. I assure you through that this is necessary. Our history is proof that we must be vigilant and that we need good systems to counter corruption. This review is therefore both timely and important. I encourage you all to support Mr. Schwabe's report and vote in favor of the draft resolution and recommendation. Thank you, President.
Thank you very much. I now call Madame Marietta Carmenali from France.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. First of all, I as well would like to thank our colleague, Frank Schwabe, the rapporteur of the Rules Committee. And has offered us an overview of the current state of affairs and offered as well a certain number of proposals about this major issue, which is the prevention of corruption, the environment in which it occurs, and the pernicious effects that it has on our democracies and on our assembly. Indeed, corruption is a major problem, the expressions of which can appear in different forms, different nature, different seriousness, and corruption and conflicts of interest can globally affect the capacity of governments to be able to govern in the public interest and for the general welfare. They are, in fact, corruption is a challenge to democracy itself and therefore weakens it. In terms of the comments and suggestions from our colleague, I would like to add 3 more things that we could focus our attention on. The first of all has to do about what our assembly could do in thinking more about the idea of using national declarations on lack of conflict of interest and add that into our system some way where only complementary information would have to be used here in our specific case. A second suggestion was that our assembly could implement awareness-raising measures for our colleagues about the harm caused by corruption and conflicts of interest and the way in which we can work on developing the different exchanges or communication tools that exist. And lastly, another factor that I would like to contribute to our rapporteur is that our assembly could also think about reinforcing its connections with civil society to make sure that they understand better what it is we're actually doing within this institution, what we're doing in general also in member states and amongst other decision makers to prevent these evils from happening in society in general. We need to make sure that what we're doing in-house, but also outside of our house, are more visible. And we can get there if our concern is understood as being cross-cutting in nature and not just one more system being added on to other measures that we've got. These measures support one another, and this must not be forgotten. So, of course, I support this proposal and the work that will be started afterwards based on it. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And our final speaker is Mr. Yuri Kamilchuk from Ukraine. Mr. Kamilchuk, you have the floor.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, distinguished colleagues. Thank you, Mr. Schwabe, for your report. Today I speak in strong support of the Council of Europe commitment to the rule of law and the fight against corruption principles that are vital for Ukraine's democratic resilience and for Euro integration. Ukraine's participation in GRECO has been instrumental in aligning our anti-corruption efforts with European standards. GRECO's evaluations have not only identified challenges, but also provided clear direction for reform. In a country undergoing a democratic transformation such as Ukraine, this guidance is critical. Judicial reform remains one of the Ukraine's top priorities. We are grateful for the Council's consistent support in this area. We are working to ensure our judges and prosecutors are free from both political influence and corruption. Fighting high-level corruption is not just a legal issue, it is a test of our democracy. Trust in public institutions depends on visible and credible action. That's why Ukraine established independent bodies like NABU and the High Anti-Corruption Court. These institutions have already shown that change is possible when political will and international cooperation align. Let us also be clear, Russia's ongoing aggression underscored the need for stronger, more resilient legal systems. So the rule of law must withstand both internal pressures and external threats. For Ukraine, it is not an abstract concept, it is a matter of national survival and democratic legitimacy. In conclusion, Ukraine is determined to continue its reform path. We count on the continued support of the Council of Europe, not only as a partner, but as a co-guardian of the values we all share: democracy, accountability, and justice. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Colleagues, earlier in the debate there was a little confusion and Ms. Volkshi of Albania was unable to make her address. We have time, so I've agreed that she can now address the Assembly now. Ms. Volkshi.
Thank you very much for giving me another possibility to speak for an issue that is very problematic in the whole region, but especially in my country, Albania. So that's why I requested to have this chance to speak. It's time to speak loud about a plague that silently consumes nations from within, so the corruption. Corruption is not a political issue. Corruption is worse than every other phenomenon. It's like a disease that has metastasis across all layers of the society, that destroys all institutions, paralyzes the economy, and erodes public trust. Corruption is stealing, but it steals not only money, but it steals opportunity, it steals dignity, and it steals justice. It breeds inequality. It undermines foreign investments, rule of law, rewards criminality over merits. Every bribe paid, every contract rigged, every institution that is hijacked by private interests, by oligarchs, is a stab to the heart of democracy. Nowhere is more painful visible in these days than in Albania, a country rich in potentials, rich in human resources and natural resources. It's a beautiful country. It has seas, mountains, lakes, everything. It has nice people, but bad governments. Corruption is no longer incidental. It's institutionalized. It is built into public contracts, PPPs, concessions, tender services. It is embedded in the procurement processes. Is present in the justice system, in the police force, in the local and central government. It's a shadow, it's parallel state, stealing from the future of our children. The corruption is killing people. You have seen lately, it killed in Serbia, but through the concessions, PPPs and contracts in Albania, it's killing people in the health sector because they are not taking health services because the money is going to oligarchs and to clients of the government. International indices have repeatedly sounded the alarm. Transparency International Corruption Perception Index ranks Albania among the most corrupt countries in Europe. EU progress as well. Let's be clear, corruption in Albania is not about few bad people, it's about a system that should be destroyed. And here, all of us have our roles. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, and that definitely now concludes the list of speakers. I now invite the rapporteur, Mr. Schwab, to reply. You have 3 minutes.
Thank you very much, Mr. President. Thank you very much, dear colleagues. Thank you very much for this exchange of views and for, I understand, the unanimous support of this report. Thank you very much, especially to our colleague, gracias to Mexico. I think we can really cooperate and learn from each other how to prevent corruption. I cannot refer to all of you. It's not possible in 3 minutes' time, but I want to refer maybe to those one who spoke in the name of the groups. Thank you to Mr. Wichel in the name of ECPA. Thanks to Mr. Petru from ALDA. I think you are right. We have to make clear that there is a kind of interconnection with the national level, and we have to encourage all our national parliaments to deal with this topic. I would like to thank Petra Bayer in the name of the SOC group. She underlined that we need a kind of culture of anti-corruption. I fully agree with this. Thank you to Christoph Brico about giving the report a kind of historical and philosophical dimension with naming the Tocqueville. And finally, thank you to Andre Hunko, thank you for this very warm words you found about the history of everything, and thank you very much, especially because you will leave the Assembly as the chair of the... maybe you will leave it as the chair of UL. Thank you so much. 3 things I would like really to underline at the end. First, really take it serious. Take it serious. If we speak about the culture, take it serious. Don't feel annoyed of this kind of system. Sometimes I think, you have to declare this and that. It's a little bit difficult, you have to do that, but it's necessary. We need this kind of culture. Second, for sure, take it home. We have a lot of problems with this kind of game between the national parliaments and the kind of pace work here. So please look into it. And third, value the civil society. There was a kind of attack of the civil society. No, without the civil society, without free media, we would not know about the scandal here and we could not take action. I underline again the work of the European Stability Initiative. Mr. Knaus was named of the UCCRP, Organized Crime and Corruption Reporting Project. Just to know, it's financed half by US aid, or was financed by the government of Switzerland and by George Soros Open Society Foundation. I know the attacks on this foundation. Without this foundation, there would not be the possibility really to speak about the scandal. And there is free and public finance media who was involved as well. Again, there is a documentary on English I really would refer to you. Look and check it, and a movie made by Mr. Harich. At the very end, I do my work really by heart, and I do it by heart, and I know that there are people who work in this organization and they do it by heart, and I know that the scandal disturbed them a lot in their work, and they didn't understand what was going on, so I would like to thank Ellie Hourigan and for sure Isilde Ertin as well for your work. And very finally, I want to thank, because you have to leave maybe as well, I would to thank the chair of the next time, we call it Rules and Ethics and Immunity Committee. Thank you very much, dear Heike.
Thank you very much, Frank. I now invite the chair of the committee, Ms. Engelhardt, to address us for 3 minutes.
Thank you, dear President, dear colleagues. Firstly, I would like to thank the rapporteur for his continued energy and determination to ensure a sufficient focus on these important issues, to fight corruption and to ensure robust integrity frameworks within the Council of Europe and our Parliamentary Assembly. As the rapporteur sent out, no institution, including this Assembly, is immune from the risks of corruptible influences. But we are responsible for how we respond to these risks. As politicians, we must demonstrate our continued commitment to robust integrity frameworks and strong ethical standards. This is vital in order to maintain public trust in politicians who serve their people and public confidence in our democratic institutions. With this in mind, I welcome the proposals contained in this report and the draft resolution and recommendation to strengthen the Assembly's integrity framework. Moreover, I welcome the proposals to ensure that the Assembly continues to keep such matters under careful scrutiny, notably through the work of the newly renamed Committee on Rules, Immunities and Ethics, and the newly established General Rapporteur on Ethical Standards and Anti-Corruption. In that light, I welcome the Rules Committees and the Assembly's continued commitment to make ethics and integrity a central part of what we, the Parliamentary Assembly, stand for, fully in line with the Council of Europe's commitment to democratic principles and its focus on promoting its core values and democracy, rule of law, and human rights. Dear colleagues, this report was the last one I had the honor to chair here in Strasbourg. For 3.5 years, I was member of our Assembly. I would like to thank you all for your kind cooperation. I wish you all the best. Keep strong fighting on our ideals for democracy, human rights, and rule of law. Thank you all who are doing this work. Thank you for the great support the assistants and secretariats, and last but not least, the ladies and gentlemen hidden in the boxes who are doing the great translation service. Thank you, danke, merci, grazie, gracias, Evcharistopoli.
Thank you very much. Thank you for all your hard work, and we wish you well for the future. Colleagues, the debate is now closed. The Committee on Rules of Procedure, Immunities and Institutional Affairs has presented a draft resolution to which no amendments have been tabled and a draft recommendation to which no amendments have been tabled. We now proceed to vote on the draft resolution contained in document 16138. A simple majority is required. The vote is now open. Okay. The vote is now closed. I call for the result to be displayed. There's no doubt it's been adopted. Colleagues, we will now proceed to vote on the draft recommendation contained in document 16138. I remind you a two-thirds majority is required. The vote is open. The vote is closed. I call for the vote to be displayed. I think that's quite clear. It is adopted. Colleagues, the debate is now totally concluded. I will now propose to suspend the sitting. Please, could you be back here by 11:55 for the next item of business, which will be the communication from the Committee of Ministers. The Assembly is now adjourned until 12. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Do I leave these here and you?
Up to you.
I will. Yeah, all done. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
So when are you back in Paris?
On Friday.
On Friday?
On
Yes,
Friday.
You live in Paris?
Yes, I do.
I'm so sorry. No, we have a house here in France. We have in Bettel.
Oh, really?
So we here for
Hey, good to see you. Welcome back, huh? You been to Berlin or what? Brussels. Brussels. Hi, hello, how are you doing? So is your trip to...
Our Irish youth delegation to California. And yes, I've scheduled on the agenda and see if we can yes, I went there. So I just need to and it's a 9 a.m. session that I'm actually just thinking because I might get that much from my edges. I always forget where we sit on the front environment.
The concert museum?
Since they come to my place,
Ah, yeah,
also, shake hands and say hi to Luxembourg, and then I'll, because it's right by my house, actually.
Oh, okay,
In that area, so it's easy. Hey, hello, hello, how are you?
Fine, and you? You had a good trip to...
It's very hard, very difficult.
I received some nice pictures. A beer every time.
You don't know what to
Now we're waiting.
Although the layover in Basel was it's a while, 10 hours.
It's a nice place.
With that,
The airport in Basel.
When there's a big difference between lounge access and we don't have lounge access transport. It was lovely.
Okay.
Yeah, before that it was yeah. And Dominic had cultural program, right? Oh, yeah, Dominic had a cultural program, which I missed. I fell asleep on the lounge.
Yeah, the cultural
You know, one time when you're in Basel, you go to art.
When in Basel?
Classic principle. You know, I have to have it. Yeah. talking about our trip with our trip. Yes, yes, on the mountain.
So all types of weather in one weekend.
4 seasons in one day.
Spectacular also for the way.
Yes. I was. I survived. We're making a t-shirt. We're going to have t-shirts. I survived. We were drinking in the lounge, waiting for the plane. They really seem to be getting it together.
You are expecting me.
That's
why we all are here.
Yes, exactly.
Good idea. Yeah, so, what is life? Bonjour.
Yeah, you should have an whole hour. Quite often.
Well, thank you.
No, you know
I know. We are not the same fault. Bon, thank you. Personne n'est passé. Hopefully Patrick will be okay now.
Thank you so much.
I think he was never this committee.
Xavier. No, don't. Nothing back.
Dear colleagues, please be seated. Ladies and gentlemen, dear colleagues, it is an honor to once again welcome Mr. Xavier Bettel, Minister of Foreign Affairs and Foreign Trade of Luxembourg and Chair of the Committee of Ministers to this Assembly. Minister Bettel will present a communication about the ongoing activities of the Luxembourg Presidency of the Committee of Ministers, which will be followed by an exchange of views with our parliamentarians. Minister Bettel, I should like to thank you for the excellent cooperation we have between us and between the statutory bodies during your presidency of the Committee of Ministers, which will come to an end in just a few weeks' time. I have already had the honor of visiting your country on a couple of occasions during my time as President of the Assembly, and look forward to returning for the Ministerial Conference in May, when we will continue to work together to advance the core values that unite us. We look forward to hearing your address today, and I now have the honor to give you the floor.
Mr. Chairman, as I told you last time that it was always my wish as a young member of parliament to be member of this assembly, I never managed to be here, so you cannot imagine how pleased I am for being the third time now in Strasbourg to meet the Council of Europe and the second time in this distinguished assembly. Since my last speech here, I have to tell you that a lot of things changed. A lot of things changed. We have some positive news, but most of the time we cannot, when we watch TV and listen to the news, be the most excited about the news that we get. And sometimes even the news of the morning are not the same news than the news of the evening. But that's the reality. And especially in our democracies, we need to be aware. And that's a difficult time, and I lived it when I was also a prime minister during the COVID period, that we don't have answers to all the questions that our citizens have. And that they live in situations today that they don't know what is going to happen tomorrow, and they ask the politicians, so how do you think that the things are going to evaluate? And I would say, make a bet that today someone telling us what will happen the next 6 months is not existing. Yes, we live in an unpredictable period where the geopolitics is changing all the time. That's a fact. You can say that everything is going well, you can say that everything is perfect, you can say that think that isolation and to just focus on yourself could be a solution. I just can tell you that for common problems we need mostly common solutions. Il y a en effet.
Indeed, since our last meeting, and that wasn't even that long ago, I should point out perhaps that I'm also Minister for External Trade. And I can tell you that we're very concerned right now. There was a meeting of the ministers responsible for trade in Luxembourg on Monday of this week regarding the US tariffs and the number of decrees that have been adopted in the United States of America. We know that this has had an impact on the global situation. The first decrees, allow me to say this, I mean, we're here in a multilateralist assembly, we share a continent, all of us together. We don't necessarily have the same language or the same culture or the same way of operating, but we do share a continent. We have a common continent, and multilateralism is something I believe in, and it's been hard hit by these recent events. When you've got a major donor like the USA, which is trying to cut off aid to others, that's not good. And I'm sure that many of you in your own parliaments have been asking questions. NGOs have been asking questions. Members of the public have been asking questions. What are you going to do? Are you going to fill the gap? Are you going to commit more? What are you going to do to counterbalance this decision taken by the USA? So we see that there are alliances and certain forms of multilateralism that are being really affected, seriously affected by these recent developments. In addition to which, we have the situation in Ukraine. Let me say right from the outset, I mean, this is our own continent. I told you, this is our continent. We share it, our common continent. And we have a country that's being aggressed by the Russian Federation and the Grand Duchy of Luxembourg, my country. And I want to say this quite clearly, the very, very, very broad majority. There are just a few individuals who might have a different, slightly nuanced position, but for the broad majority, we absolutely agree that we should support Ukraine. And there are people who want to rewrite history today. You know, some people would tell you that it's actually Ukraine that's at the origin of this situation. You know, I don't need to go to my history books to tell you what's happened here. This is the situation as it prevails today. So we have partnerships, we have cooperation, we have alliances, we have friendships. This is very important. It's been the case since the Second World War, and we ourselves have been, you know, very much embedded in this idea of never again. We must work together. Never again should these terrible things happen. So Like I said, the partnerships have been shaken, if I may use an English term there. And also, alongside that, we can see that multilateralism is suffering. The UN can take decisions, all sorts of other international bodies can take decisions, but what about the implementation of those decisions? Might actually be a dead letter in many cases. I don't think I need to say this before your House, before your Assembly. I'm sure you agree. You know, we need to look at our own system, the way in which the international multilateral system works. Do we need to look at reform, perhaps? You have the P5, the 5 countries that are supposed to guarantee peace. That is what they are designed to do. That's what they were asked to do when the UN was set up. And now they have veto decisions, and that has ramifications. Also, President, Secretary General, allow me to make one further comment. Why is it that Africa is not on this UN Security Council? Why not? A whole continent missing. Why not? Question number one. Secondly, I'm not an economist by training, but I was always told that an administrative board was responsible and accountable before a General Assembly. Just as I am here before you as a General Assembly, I'm here to account for my actions. The UN seems to be the opposite. It's actually the General Assembly that seems to be answerable to the Security Council. It's the other way around. So maybe we should think about a reform. Maybe a General Assembly should be able to also override a veto by a given country with a certain majority, let's say 3/4, whatever. You'd need the agreement of the P5, of course. That's not straightforward, far from it. They would need to agree. But I think it's something that we maybe need to give some thought to in terms of multilateralism, in terms of how we understand it across the board. Maybe certain points of view need to change. I speak here of multilateralism, and I've spoken also about cooperation. I've actually just come back from some countries I visited. I was in Cambodia last week. I was in Oman the week before, Bhutan the week before that. I'm going off to Japan tomorrow, so I have a lot of different roles to play on these missions, on these visits. You know, just because one country decides to cut off cooperation, that doesn't mean to say that cooperation will be better off. No, it'll be reduced. It will be reduced. And the disparities that we find between countries, you know, that's something we note today, and cooperation today is not really as good as it should be. Many of your parliaments, when we talk about greater military expenditure, because we feel that we're being pushed to do this really because of the circumstances. So when these discussions take place, well, who's going to pay the price for that? Cooperation, unfortunately, which I greatly deplore. Diversity, equality, rights, individual rights, you know, these are something that we thought was acquired once and for all, values that we all agreed with. Well, it's very much being undermined right now. So what should we do? What can we learn from this? Maybe we can learn that it's an opportunity for Europe. Perhaps it's an opportunity. The fact that, you know, we need to find solutions, maybe individual solutions. Does that make us stronger? I said it when the foreign affairs ministers met recently. If we want to carry some weight here, then, you know, this is the time to do this, but we need to do it together. We need to do it, 27 of us in the EU, for instance. We need to stand together. You know, I know, as a former Prime Minister of Luxembourg, I know the kind of weight I carry as, you know, as Prime Minister of Luxembourg, now as Foreign Affairs Minister. It's not a matter of flattery, it's not a matter of egos, it's just a matter of saying that together, if we're 27, we will carry much more weight. If you think that you can go on some kind of pilgrimage individually to Washington and change the situation, change the paradigm, quite honestly, I would respond, it will weaken us. It will weaken us because we won't have a union, and the union is what makes us strong. The union is our market. Some people will say, well, you're being weak. You should actually respond and respond with some vehemence to the United States of America. You know, we're trying to weigh all this up. What are the impacts of any possible action? And, you know, it's actually the US taxpayer that will pay, that will foot the bill for this. Maybe that's the plan. You know, what's the fallback plan? Well, the fallback plan would that be for us to respond in kind, if you like, in the same way with measures taken by the EU? I don't want that. I don't hope to see that. I hope that we can find diplomatic channels which are much more effective. Now, last time I came before you, you know, the House was on fire a bit. I think I said it was chaos. Let me use the word chaos to use diplomatic language, just to say it wasn't easy. It wasn't easy then. It's certainly not easy now. It's not got any better. Also, allow me to say, well, a little anecdote for you, since we're talking about the international situation. it's something that we saw with President Zelensky. Now, look what happened when he went to Washington, President Zelensky. That episode. You know, I was Prime Minister for a decade, and I know a lot of colleagues, a lot of heads of state and government, but I don't know many. After what happened in the White House, anyone who a few days later would have this humility, this modesty in political terms, who would be humble enough to say, I'm coming back because we need to move forward, we need to move on. Somebody who's actually prepared to say, I'm prepared to step down because my country is in peril. I don't know many politicians who will put their country before their post, their position, and I say this loud and clear. So for those who say that President Zelensky is a dictator or not a democrat, I'm sorry, you really, really haven't understood what Mr. Zelensky is all about. The president wants what's best for his people, clearly. Situation in Ukraine, we have the core group. The core group is working hard. And we're seeing that right now. You know that this was one of the decisions we took together on the special tribunal. So that's underway. We also have a compensation commission being set up, so there's work underway on that. I wanted to really pay tribute to the UN Secretary-General's envoy, Gylfadóttir, who's responsible for the question of children. Also, the recent initiative of the Secretary-General, namely to set up a liaison office for the Council of Europe in New York with the United Nations. These are important steps, important signals. So we're coming together rather than splitting up, dividing, going further and further apart. Now, our presidency, another month to go, and then we can hand over to our esteemed colleagues. But in my last speech before this House, you may remember, well, since then, there's been a Council of Ministers and the adoption of the Convention on the Protection of the Profession of Lawyers, which will be signed in Luxembourg on the 13th of May, so very soon. This is an important step in terms of protecting lawyers who in turn protect the rule of law. Over the course of the last 5 months, you know, we've done a number of things. Mid-term review conference on the strategy of the Council of Europe for the rights of the child, another conference on ombudspersons and national human rights institutions, etc., etc. Lots of work, also including youth. What's been important for me is to be able to say that my country really has made a real, genuine commitment to the Council of Europe, to this organisation. You know, it doesn't go without saying. Our head of state is coming before this House today and will speak to you. Prime Minister as well. A number of ministers have come before you. And I can tell you that it's really important to us. You know, within the Council of Government, my colleagues have taken this very seriously. 6 ministers who have actually come here in order to meet with you, to talk to you. So that's quite an achievement, I think. What about the challenges of the presidency? I think you're all familiar with these. I mean, Georgia, first challenge. I had a meeting with the Foreign Affairs Minister quite recently. I thought it was important to have a discussion, to sit down and talk together. You know, to talk over one another is not a good thing. To talk with one another, listen to one another is the best thing we can do. But I said, it's not for me to tell you what you should be doing, but, you know, to maybe give you a pointer, an indication of where you should be heading. You have a choice to make. You can't, on the one hand, say you want to be closer to Europe, but we also want to be friends with Russia. And we want to be close to Russia, and at the same time, we want to make the most of what Europe can offer us. That's not going to work. Doesn't add up. I'm not saying you have to make a choice, that these are different camps and you have to choose, but you can't say one thing and then say the very opposite, or to say one thing and to do the very opposite. Look at the demonstrations in Tbilisi. Look at the minorities and the way they are being impacted, affected. We can see this on the ground. Georgia is heading in a direction which is not the one that we share here in this assembly. Not. And therefore, when it comes to our Georgian colleagues, you know, we need to say to them, they decide their own future. But they need to also be aware of the consequences of the decisions they might take. We also have Turkey. I talked to my colleague, Minister of Foreign Affairs in that country. I'm sure there'll be questions on this. You know, I can give you the official version of what's going on here, judicial proceedings, etc. But what I see as well is that there are thousands and thousands of Turkish citizens who have taken to the streets and who have said, stop saying that this is, you know, a corruption trial or that he doesn't have his diploma, his qualifications. No. For them, you know, the election is not fair. There was an opponent. There was someone who actually stood a chance of winning. And things are being said about this person which are wrong to get him out of the race. So, you know, this is not the kind of discussion you should be having with someone from the opposition. And therefore, with our colleagues in Turkey, we need to see how we can organise elections, how they can organise elections where different candidates can stand and stand a fair chance of actually winning. We also have Azerbaijan and Armenia. I mean, I'm quite pleased. We're doing reasonably well. We're moving forward little by little, step by step. That's good. You know, agreements have been signed, and I really hope that they will last, but it's a fragile situation. It's really fragile, and therefore, you know, we need to move forward, have discussions. Kosovo, I know you care very much about Kosovo, and I also know that your assembly, when it comes to Kosovo, I know that you wanted to put the question of Kosovo to the vote at a future meeting of the Committee of Ministers to see what kind of procedure should be followed. I mean, I've been told since the beginning of my presidency that there was a question concerning the Serbian minority. Serbian minority, for 6 months, I've been told this, the government has to make progress on the question of the Serbian minority. This is what I've been told time and time again. Now, I'm told there's no longer a problem. So I ask, well, what's happened? What does that mean? Does that mean that this Serbian community minority, is everything okay? Do we need to do anything? Do we not need to do anything? I'm told there's been progress, but there's no government for the time being. We need to have negotiations in situ. So all I can tell you is that Kosovo is actually a country I know well. Serbia is a country I also know well. The Balkans is not just about those two. It's not just about those two. Bosnia, right now, is also powder keg, if I may put it in those terms, and the region is under tension, I would say, whether it's Dodic, whether it's in Pristina, whether it's Vučić, whether it's Mr. Kurti. You know, whatever the situation, it's very important for us to keep an eye on developments and to encourage them to go in the right direction to avoid the worst case scenario, because we know what that can mean. It's happened in the past. It's one of the last genocides that we witnessed on our territory. That is the peril, that is the risk, and that is the reality. Therefore, we need to talk to the different parties. We need to see how we can move forward in order to find a solution. And I will personally continue to advocate, to advocate in favour of a situation where people have rights. I mean, I grew up in peace. I told you this last time, President. I was very fortunate. I grew up in a situation of peace. I was so lucky. My neighbour was not a danger, wasn't a threat. But today we see that even within the European Union, we have to start asking ourselves questions about the behaviour of some of our neighbours. And for us, it's really, really important to continue to defend these values.
And the European Court of Human Rights as well. At the beginning of March, we had a meeting with the Committee of Ministers about the carrying out of the sentence of the court. 38 decisions about 70 different states were adopted at the time. In my opinion, it was quite simply, or it's essential that we continue to work in that same direction. In this group that brings together people who have different opinions, as I mentioned earlier, that come from different traditions. And at the end of the day, we can't forget that difference is indeed. I know that some people have actually made a bit their living by saying that that's actually part of our weakness in Europe, but it is what makes us rich. It is our wealth. Don't fall in the trap of certain people today. I can see there are certain countries who seem to be a bit afraid of certain parties that might be flirting with some other parties, but don't do as they're doing. When I see today that Schengen, soon we're going to be having the anniversary of the Schengen agreement as well, that we wouldn't say that it's in danger, but there are some people who think that perhaps if we close our borders, we might be able to stop problems that are happening in certain countries. But if we're going to have a well-functioning migratory policy, it needs to be a joint policy with decisions taken jointly and carried out jointly with surveillance that's done together. We've seen with COVID as well, to what extent when you closed borders, did that stop the virus at the borders? So I think we need to learn from the errors of the past and not fall under the spell of the populism. Thank you very much for your attention.
Thank you, Minister Bettel. Though as a very experienced politician, you have already answered a lot of questions which are going to be addressed to you. I'm going to start now the procedure, which is the questions from my colleagues. And on behalf of the political groups, I will give first the floor to the leader of the Socialist, Greens and Democrats, Mr. Frank Schwabe.
Vielen Dank, Herr Präsident.
Thank you very much, Chairperson. My thanks as well to the Minister of Foreign Affairs for the enthusiasm with which you have spoken to us and that you work for. You've already mentioned about Kosovo, but I would like to just make a specific question about that. It seems as if we've been invited to a birthday party where we say, yes, we'd like to come, we come, but then there's no cake. So you have to remember that the Committee of Ministers, those who represent the countries, asked us for our opinion. We gave them our opinion at an 82% agreement. We're waiting for the answer. So after the ministerial, we want this to be on the agenda. You decide what the agenda of that ministerium is going to be.
Would you like to respond?
Ja, ich glaube, ich habe. Kann ich auf Deutsch antworten?
Am I allowed to answer in German? He asks. Yes. Yes. The question for me. I have nothing against this. I've spoken with the other foreign ministers spoken about today, and I would very much, when something has unanimity on the Council of Ministers, then I would like to bring it onto the agenda. But we don't have unanimity yet. I don't want there to be a danger that before that Kosovo is also left outside of the birthday party and can't even come in at all, because even if they were there, I want to make sure that they can eat from that cake as well. But this is a question of time, and the situation needs to be a bit more stabilized a bit. The future of Kosovo is indeed with us. Europe is the future of Kosovo, and I say that quite clearly. And I know that not everyone will find this answer to be completely satisfying. However, this is something I've said in the past as well, that it's not normal that there be a country out there and is concerned about how its neighbors might be treating it. And my hope is that when we actually have a government in Kosovo, and I hope that that can be formed as quickly as possible, and that we just as quickly can engage in dialogue with Serbia. But please do not forget as well that we have Bosnia-Herzegovina, which is also a powder keg right now. We speak so much about Kosovo that we sometimes forget that right next door is another potentially a place where things potentially could also be not so nice.
Helleland, on behalf of the European People's Party.
Minister, for a very engaging speech. The minister mentioned that the partnership, which has now been shaken, means that we as a continent more than ever need to stand united. At the same time, the minister said that this could create opportunities for our continent. And what kind of opportunities should we, as the Council of Europe, focus on to make our continent stronger?
Thank you. Minister.
It is a bit hard to give advices to a parliamentary assembly. I just can tell you, as a Minister of Foreign Affairs and also of Foreign Trade, it's an opportunity to realize that we as Europe should also be stronger in Europe. I saw it with the COVID. Remember, the masks were all coming from China. All the machines were coming from China. I saw it with the gas. When the Russians decided to cut the gas, we didn't know what to do. So I think it's, and we see it today also, that when we see cars productions, that so many pieces are not coming from Europe. And I could do a long list about where Europe always counted on trusted partners. And so from my point of view, it will be important in the next years to think how we can be more independent. We all speak about the AI for the moment. AI is a big topic. Where is Europe for the moment? I'm sorry to be that frank with you, but we are squeezed between Asia and America. Europe is a confetti. We think we have over millions of inhabitants, that we have so much money and that we are the biggest economy, but where are we? And that's, for me, the biggest challenge, that we have the opportunities maybe to see that with defense. NATO, I remember the meeting, I was Prime Minister at the moment where we had this meeting in Brussels about defense with Donald Trump won. And when after that we realized, okay, this was a wake-up call also, to think that peace was always granted, and we have to admit, you come from a country, you are closer to Russia than I'm for the moment. So I have to admit that for our politicians, the sensibility from a Russian threat was not the same. And I'm speaking now as Luxembourger. So imagine Portugal or Spain, you know, even more on the west-south side. So, and we didn't thought that it was really such an urgency to have also more, I don't want to say military, but security, because the D of dissuasion is also important. And so there are opportunities, and we should also think, and this I might provoke your assembly with that, but we should not forget that the European Union was built on coal and steel at the beginning. This was the aim of the European Union. And today, when we realize, when I look modern thing, I told you, for example, on AI, on phones, you have Samsung, or you have Apple, or you have Huawei. I remember, and sorry to say that from someone coming from the north, I remember Motorola and Ericsson, but I remember, I don't have them. And today, when we see, for example, Airbus is a big success because we were able to say it's a European company. It's a European company together with the Brits, with the Germans, with the French, with the Spanish. We were able to create a European company to be stronger. And we have European rules for the moment where when you are too strong in Europe, then you have to be smaller. We had it in Luxembourg. For example, Bettel wanted to buy Ilva in Italy. Because they wanted to buy Ilva in Italy, they had to sell Liberty Steel in Luxembourg, because they would have been too big. At the end of the day, Liberty Steel was close to bankruptcy, and the deal with Ilva was never done. So we need to see, firstly, the competitive rules in the European Union, not to think just about Europe, but also on a global scale, because, as I told you before, for the moment, we are not global leaders. And on the other hand, for example, for security, we have so many countries producing military industry. And so there is no interest for the moment. In America, they have about, I would say, I don't have the exact figures, but say 4 guns. We have 25. So the interoperability between the countries is smaller. But the second thing is the production costs are higher. So why don't we think as opportunity to say, okay, let's do things together instead of producing just ourselves? So because we speak global very often, but we act local. And so if we want to have a stronger Europe, we have not only to speak global, but also to act global.
Thank you, Minister. Sylvie Jostran, on behalf of the European Conservative Patriots and Affiliates.
Merci, Monsieur. Thank you very much, Chairperson. Chairperson, the immediate implementation of disqualification of standing for elections delivered last Monday against Marine Le Pen had been sought by the French public prosecutor, which is tied very much in a hierarchical relation to the executive power. And the person has been deprived of effective repeal since they are barred from holding office for 2027. And this also is not giving the voters the chance to express their choice. So this is a barrier to democratic participation. What would the Committee of Ministers have to say about the death of the principle of fair hearing in France? What I'm bothered about is that when it happens to others, it doesn't matter, but when it happens to us, it's a catastrophe. This immediate implementation was not an idea that was just invented last week, so she is a victim of this, she's saying, but this is a principle that was voted on by the Assemblée Nationale in French, so there's a problem with the French laws. It's the French Assemblée Nationale that is supposed to change those laws.
Eric Neil Cross, on behalf of the Liberal Democrats.
Thank you, President. Dear Minister, you talked about the Russian crime of aggression against Ukraine. Thank you very much for that. My question is about next steps. I mean, this House has repeatedly emphasized there's urgency for justice in Ukraine. So what are the priorities, political, legal priorities, for the Committee of Ministers, for you personally, to successfully launch the International Special Tribunal, the compensation mechanism for Ukraine, and also what can we do to transfer the frozen Russian assets for use in Ukraine? Thank you.
Thank you, Eric. Minister?
Two different things. So the first thing will be about the tribunal. So there was a core group, and the 14th and final meeting of the core group took place on the 19th to the 21st of March. And they finalized also the technical work. And the Luxembourg presidency actively supports the implementation of decisions taken at the Reykjavik summit, and this includes also the steadfast support for Ukraine on that topic. About frozen Russian assets, because we have just to be aware that there are two discussions that we have also in Europe, and very often we mix up everything between the frozen assets and the immobilized assets. And the one from the central bank, the central Russian bank, and the one belonging to entities, companies, or private persons. And for me, it is just important that we make a big difference between both. And for the moment, the discussion is because we have, for example, Belgium, with Euroclear, has a lot of frozen assets from the Russian central bank. I belong to the one, it's not because I was a lawyer in my former life, but it is difficult to take, for the moment we have the interest, and with the interest we can invest them in Ukraine. But for me it's legally difficult to take away something from someone if you have just a political decision. That's the first thing. For me it is important that you have a court decision or that we ask a justice body to take a decision that it's just guaranteed. Because I know how it will go. If afterwards there is a trial and Belgium will be condemned to pay back the money, I don't know if the other 26 countries will be solidary and support Belgium to pay back the money they gave on the political decisions to Ukraine, first thing. The second thing is, from my point of view, it's that we should also see with the private persons, because this was now the central bank, with the private persons. Again, if we take, then it's not only a confiscation, but it's to deprive, as the ambassador said, to deprive then someone from his own goods. And then we have to know, and that's not me that I'm saying that comes from the central bank, if with that decisions, that political decisions, can decide to take things away from persons or from companies or from national banks, that we don't have a risk then for investors to leave Europe and then prefer going to Dubai or to London, because they will say in Europe, political decisions can decide to take away things. Political decisions, not the justice decision. And so from my point of view, or we have the principle of solidarity. So if one country is sued and after needs to pay, that we give the guarantee that because they pay in the name of us to someone, but then we are solidary also to pay back if there is a case. Because the worst thing is that they ask Ukraine to pay back if something has been taken away and given to Ukraine. And I would recommend to really have a justice decision where we have the guarantee that at least the legality has been proven. And I just want to remind also that it's a question of stability of financial markets if you have the feeling that in Europe political decisions can take things away without a justice decision, which is usually the principle that we have.
Thank you. Andrei Hunko, the co-chair of the United European Left.
Vielen Dank.
Thank you very much. Foreign Affairs Minister, I'm going to put a question to you in German. I'm over here. Hello. So I wanted to refer to the ECHR ruling. As far as I've understood, it's on your table right now because it hasn't been executed. This concerns the Öcalan case and Mr. Öcalan's rights. I wanted to ask you whether you agree with me when I say that the execution of this judgment would be a contribution to a possible peace process in this conflict, that it could contribute to facilitating that. I understand that things are afoot right now. Do you share my opinion?
Ja, danke schön.
Thank you very much for that question. Mr. Öcalan's case is not a new case. 2014, it's been on the agenda of the CM since then, 2014. And in addition to which, we have put the question to the Turkish side to ask for a mechanism to be set up. You know, what if the conditions were to deteriorate? That's something that we would need to analyze in that case. I very much hope that the administration in Turkey will continue to work together with the Council of Europe on this issue. I also would add to that that the domestic legislation needs to be brought in line with the practice and the standards of the European Convention on Human Rights. It needs to be brought in line. Furthermore, I think it's important for us to look towards the future. According to the most recent news that's been coming out, we understand that, this gives us an idea of what the future might look like. We certainly can't turn a blind eye. We can't look away. We will continue to keep this matter on the agenda and we'll continue to follow it up.
Now we're going to the rest of the list. The speakers will be divided in group of 3. You know the procedure, dear Minister, so if you want to take notes, I will start with Gökçen first.
Thank you, Mr. President. My question will be about the case of Mr. İmamoğlu. CHP's presidential candidate Ekrem İmamoğlu has been jailed for political reasons along with his closest colleagues, including his campaign manager, his main advisor, and several district mayors in Istanbul. There are several lawsuits filed against CHP with demands for the appointment of a trustee to our party. Mr. Minister, you already mentioned the case of İmamoğlu, and thank you for being very well aware of the message of the protests. But what do you think the role of the Committee of Ministers can be regarding this crisis of democracy in Turkey? Thank you.
Gerardo Giovanoli is next.
Grazie Ministro. Un forte vento contrario spira dagli Stati Uniti.
Thank you very much. We can see that there are a wind that is blowing in from the United States with a decree that's come from President Trump, which goes against all of the values that we represent. It's this where power is more important than dialogue, exclusion more than inclusion, and there's an allergy to multilateralism as well. So this is indeed a nightmare. And there is a hope that things might go well, but hope, of course, is a religious virtue, not a political one. How can we actually reverse this trend? What initiatives can be undertaken by the Council of Europe to counteract this authoritarian involution? Thank you very much.
Keep the time limit.
Monsieur le Ministre, cher ami.
Friends, the residents, foreign residents who live in Luxembourg was 47% at 1st of January 2024. In 1961, the number of foreigners in Luxembourg was only 13%. So Luxembourg is an example of welcoming and integration. We're very proud of your example. Please help us point out that migration is needed in the world in order to reflect proper development and to promote prosperity and to make sure that there are greater opportunities. Tell us how we, as countries of the Council of Europe, should also be working in the same way. Thank you.
Thank you, Minister. Would you like to respond to these 3 questions?
Signore Giovanelli, la forza non dovrebbe mai essere la soluzione.
I think that force should never be the solution.
Turkish friends, I just raised it up before. All decisions to, just before elections, to put someone in jail, and that's what I asked. I spoke, to be very frank with you, also to my counterpart, to tell him that from the outside it is difficult to understand. It's difficult to understand. I'm usually not commenting on trials because I don't know what is exactly against someone or in favor of someone, but I just see from the outside that someone who is in the polls, the first one, and who is put into jail without a justice decision for the moment, so no trial. These are presumptions or anything, is something that from the outside, for me, I believe in the Turkish future to be a democratic country sticking to the value. That's why we're sitting also here together. And I really hope that this is not a signal that they want to go in a direction which is not the one I would love to see from Turkey. But I said it to Hakan Fidan that I trust him, and I trust also to the Turkish colleagues to realize that from the outside it is difficult to understand. Und dann die dritte, la troisième question.
And then the third question had to do with, where is my Portuguese colleague? Asked the question. Sorry, I'd lost you. My country was a poor country. My country was a poor country, and recently we recalled that in the 19th century, many Luxembourgers left the country because they didn't have enough to eat. The wealth of my country has been its openness. It was first of all with steel when we discovered iron. Afterwards, it was services. Many people don't know this, but RTL, for example, was when there was the Iron Curtain separating Europe, it was the radio of freedom for many who listened to it. The L stood for Luxembourg, not for Lisbon. And this should tell you that we've always known how to if we think about Pierre Werner from the 90s as well, that how we've been able to make sure that this has worked in our benefits with satellites as well, that were set up in the future, when today this is one of the jewels of our economy, because we've always known how to take that step forward on economic issues, but above all, because Luxembourg has always known how to be able to welcome people. The Portuguese community today is the second largest in my country. And I know that's not always appreciated by everyone, but you need to know that in Luxembourg, salaries are a bit higher. But that, of course, the cost of living is higher as well. And don't make the mistake of saying, I'm just going to leave everything behind. I'm going to go to Luxembourg and find a job easily. No, one has to prepare such a movement. But Luxembourg is a country. I've been the mayor of Luxembourg as well. 70% of the population of Luxembourg is not from Luxembourg, of the city of Luxembourg. 70%, almost 50% of the population of the country does not have the nationality of Luxembourg. I have no members from the extreme right in my parliament at all.
Armen Gervolcan is next.
Mr. Minister, there is growing concern over the destruction of Armenian heritage in Artsakh, Nagorno-Karabakh, by Azerbaijan, which creates conditions that make the return of Armenians to their historic homeland nearly impossible. What steps is the Council of Europe taking to ensure the right of Armenians to a safe and collective return to Artsakh under these alarming circumstances? Thank you.
Thank you. Dmitry Nataluka.
Dear Minister Bettel, thank you for your consistent support for Ukraine, for standing up for us. It's a true pleasure. Just days ago, Russian missiles struck 9 children playing on the playgrounds in Kryvyi Rih. It's a tragedy that begs for justice. The ICC has issued a warrant for Putin, but we know that without a dedicated tribunal for the crime of aggression, a major gap remains. The EU and the Council of Europe have endorsed the creation of such a tribunal, but the timeline remains vague. Will Luxembourg commit to advocating for a faster launch of this special tribunal, and what concrete steps can be taken? Thank you very much.
Nina Kasimati.
Thank you. Mr. Minister, the political turmoil which has overwhelmed Syria and the emergence of radical Islamist groups nurtured by Turkey to dominate the revolutionary scene and now the administration has fueled fears among the Christians, in particular those who live close to the group's areas of influence. These fears have materialized, and the ongoing atrocities being committed against Christians and other religious and ethnic minorities, leading to elimination, seem not to have shocked enough the international community.
Go on to your question.
In view of the aforementioned cataclysmic developments, but also non-negotiable commitments of the Council of Europe in the freedom of religion and belief, how the esteemed Council of Europe Committee of Ministers under the Luxembourgian presidency is willing to act apart from raising the issue.
Thank you, Nina. Mr. Minister, would you like to respond?
You asked, would you like to respond? If I would say no, what would you say?
I would say that there will be a lack of joy in this parliament because we all enjoy your presence here.
Thank you. So that,
and the last memorabilia that will left by you will be only your pen that you have forgotten on the rostrum. So we want last members of you to be your very interesting answers to questions being answered.
Thank you so much. So the first one about the human rights of the Armenians in Karabakh are guaranteed by the European Convention of Human Rights, and they have to be respected. Also, the right to go back in fully safety.
And I would like to say thank you also to the Secretary General, Mr. Berzet, who took also an ensemble of measures with the authorities to support also their efforts in that field. What happened in Ukraine is terrible, and I'm planning, I don't know yet for sure, but I'm in contact with my Ukrainian counterparts. I may go in 2 weeks again to Ukraine to show, because I don't want to be misunderstood, but we are all humans, and when you see the news, 6 months ago we spoke about Ukraine, now we speak about tariffs. And that's terrible, because people are dying every day in Ukraine, and we have some topics, for example, 2 Chinese soldiers have been arrested in Ukraine. These are all topics we need to discuss also on the levels of the Minister of Foreign Affairs, at least being able to ask also the Chinese counterparts what's happening there. The region where it happened is a special reason. Sorry if I say it not well, is a region where Luxembourg has a special link, and we continue to support also this region, and we are looking for the moment also how we can continue to deepen the relations. I had a special signature also with that region, but don't misunderstand me. If it's in that region or the region, every child, every woman, every man who dies is one too much. And then the third one about Syria. I have to be about the Catholics. I fully understand that this is important for some of you Catholics and non-Catholics. I don't want to be misunderstood. For me, what happened in Syria the last weeks, it's not only about Catholics. It's also about different minorities. We need to defend all of them. We can't just pick one religion.
It is about Christian minorities. It didn't say Catholics, because there are
I understood
Orthodoxies and
Catholics.
others there. Christian minorities was the question.
Yeah, but that's okay. But so Okay, I understand Catholic minorities, and so for me it was because you forgot that the Alawite, and so that was for me. Congratulations. Congratulations. I studied ecclesiastical law in Greece. I should have known that before, sorry. The fact is, for the moment, we have a regime in Syria where I just would recommend to avoid to go all in. Everybody at the beginning thought we need to find deals with the new government. They are perfect, without knowing them, because for a lot of us, it was a solution to send back Syrians, without knowing how the situations in Syria will evaluate also in the next months. For us, no new activity of cooperation has been extended about the countries you just raised. But for me, I just want to say that if we have sanctions against Syria, and if we want to lift sanctions against Syria, we have to do it, from my point of view, step by step, so results linked. So if there are protections, if there are liberties. They created now a new government, if I'm right, yesterday or a few days ago, new government where they had also minorities, also women inside. Is that the right direction or not? Again, please don't jump about every news you get about Syria to say now everything is perfect. I would really go there step by step. I like people asking questions and leaving during the answers.
Minister Bettel, thank you so much for being with us today, and thank you for your presidency. Dear colleagues, before we close the sitting, I wish to ask the Assembly to approve a change in the agenda for tomorrow, Thursday, the 10th of April. The debate on legal aspects of the accession of the European Union to the European Convention on Human Rights is currently due to take place in the afternoon sitting. I propose to bring that forward to the end of the morning sitting of the same day. Is that agreed? Agreed, thank you. And the agenda is amended accordingly. Dear colleagues, once again, I want to thank Mr. Xavier Bettel for being with us today, and I will applaud him for his lively presence as always. The Assembly will hold its next public sitting this afternoon at 3:30 p.m. with the agenda approved on Monday. The sitting is adjourned.
I just wrote him. It was kind of not so exciting.
It was in a good way.
Yeah, in a good way.